Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, the Witcher-themed card game, and today we have the new Wave the Witcher expansion, which means a bunch of new cards, as well as a new seasonal event, so an alternate game mode. That is what we'll be looking at today. The +1 seasonal event, which means that whenever we play a unit, we also spawn a 1-power copy of the unit at the end of the row. That's pretty crazy. I'd have to imagine that means we're going to have a lot of units in our rows. So let me show you what we're going to do with our deck. So this is the deck that I'm going with here. It'll be Northern Realms, and it's going to be Royal Inspiration. That is generally my preferred leader ability. Tactical Advantage will be our tactic card, but I suppose you can probably swap in whatever you like here if you have any alternatives that you prefer. And generally speaking, I think that the thing that we want to do with our deck here is that we want to maximize the number of abilities that we have from cards that do things when they are on the playing field, because then we are creating 2 of those when we create a copy of that card. We do not want to do much when it comes to deploy abilities, because the wording is that we are spawning a second card, not playing a second card, which means that the deploy ability will only trigger once for the original card and will not trigger for the second card, at least based on the wording there. You would assume that's the case. For that reason, not going to have too many deploy abilities in our deck here. I am going to lead off with Geralt Yrden, which is a deploy card, obviously. I think the reason why I would still very much like to have him is because I do think that our opponents will be able to do some crazy things with their card duplication. So for that reason, I think being able to reset a row will be a nice luxury to have. So being able to, say, play Geralt in the last round would be pretty fantastic, or at least could be. Then I'm going to go with Anseis, and I think he could be one of the strongest cards here to take advantage of the special game mode. If we create a copy of him, of course that copy will have only 1 strength, but that is such a strong ability, his order ability here, to duel an opposing enemy, at least if he's inspired. Getting him all the way up to a point where he will be inspired, maybe that's a different question, because dueling with a 1 strength or 2 strength unit, maybe not going to be a huge play for us, but if we can find a way to make it happen, then that could be a real game changer. Then Donimir of Troy is an interesting one because normally he'd be a 7 strength, 2 armor, shielded defender, which is not bad. That's a hard card to get through. However, when you're creating a copy of him with 1 strength, I mean, he still has the armor and still has the shield, yes, but that's still a little funny to have a 1 strength defender. I suppose, technically speaking, Syndicate does have that with Azar Javid and the bees that he creates, but still, that's a little bit odd. Then we have Nenneke, and she is an order ability card, and order also is a good thing to do, I would think, because of course, if you create a copy of this card, then the copy of the card will also be able to use the order. So the idea here is we'll play another Nenneke, or at least create a copy of Nenneke, and she'll also be able to boost 4 times, as long as she can stay alive when she has only 1 strength, which is maybe one of the other challenges. Finding some sources of damage could be a good way to mitigate our opponent's abilities to do some of those things, and we could do that with something like the Botchling here. So the Botchling is almost exactly what I was talking about before, in that it is a card that does something every turn. It is not a deploy ability, so it doesn't matter that we're only spawning our second unit here. So being able to damage the highest enemy unit twice could be quite good. And then we could, of course, swap it over to the Lubberkin and make it so that we're boosting our own units twice. So I think that's a very strong option. Then I'm thinking that we include this guy here because being able to boost our own units based on the number of boosted units out there. With Northern Realms, we are certainly doing a lot of boosting, and when we have more units out there, I think all the more likely that we'll have a bunch of those to create additional charges. So to have 2 of you, I think we'll have a bunch of those charges to work with. Corvo is another one that was probably at or near the top of my list in terms of cards I wanted to include in this deck. Being able to generate a ton of charges for boosts. Normally this is one of the strongest cards in this deck. I would usually be using this as my primary booster. And so to be able to get 2 sources of that, normally Corvo only has 3 strength, which is not a lot. So to create a copy that only has 1 strength is, of course, vulnerable, yes, but might mean that, well, we'll survive with 1 Corvo, maybe not the second as that one gets targeted, but I think even 1 is good enough, and in many cases, he does go down so quickly because he is so vulnerable. So to create a second one, I mean, if we can keep both of them, that'd be fantastic. Then this was a late addition here. Being able to cause bleeding is nice, yes, with 1 charge. Of course, being able to create a second copy of you would make it so that we can do that again. technically speaking, I don't think I threw in other ways to bring back those charges. There are certainly ways with Northern Realms to make that happen, but that's something that you could certainly do more to set up. I mostly just threw this guy in because I don't think I have too many other strong options in terms of cards that are not based on deployabilities. Then Nathanial Pastodi, this is another one of the key cards in this deck. Normally I would be focusing on getting cards that boost and cards that do things when they get boosted. Nathanial Pastodi falls into the latter category there, where he inflicts bleeding whenever he gets boosted. Normally, I mean, you could just throw all your boosts on a single Nathanial Pastodi, but to have a second one is nice because that way if our opponent has a way of destroying one card, we can still have a backup and boost the second Nathanial Pastodi. And likely that even if we are creating a Nathanial Pastodi with only 1 strength, he'll get boosted way above that. And Voymir, normally this card you would save for a Kedweni Revenant's deck, where you create a bazillion copies of the Kedweni Revenant card. I actually don't think that's going to be a strong card to play, the Kedweni Revenants, that is, in this game mode, because the Revenants benefit from being able to, yes, create a bazillion copies of themselves. However, in this game mode, I think we're already going to be able to do many of the same things, in that we're going to be creating many copies of cards, even without the Revenants, and our rows are going to be very crowded, which is going to make it difficult for the Revenants to do their thing. They're going to run out of space very quickly. So Voymir here does have a deployability, which means the second Voymir is not really going to do much of anything besides just be a 1-strength unit. But I do expect that we will have a reasonable amount of copies, so thinking that we use Voymir just to boost things other than Kedweni Revenants. Next we have Strenger. This would be another card that is fantastic given this game mode, at least I would have to imagine, because she can boost units on both sides of her if she herself is boosted, so to have multiple of these would be amazing, especially if you say were to play this first, or play it as the only card in a row, then she could boost herself, and then suddenly, as we were asking ourselves before, are you going to have just 1 base strength with a copy of this card, or is it also going to be a 4 base strength unit that gets lowered all the way down to 1? That could influence how quickly the copy of Strenger counts as being inspired as well. Then Egmund, another card that boosts when it's on the playing field, and so similar story here. We just want to maximize the boosting. Then Lacerate is one of the few non-unit cards we have here. Being able to damage all units on a row by 2, I think, will be very helpful, because as we were saying with us, I think we'll be able to load up on a bunch of units. I'd have to imagine similar story with our opponents, so this could equal a lot of damage, I think. So we'll throw in 2 of those. Then Radovid is an interesting one, because the deployability, sure, will only trigger with the original Radovid, yes, but to create 2 of these does mean that we'll have a little bit more carryover, which is one of the other reasons why you might put him in your deck. Temerian Drummer, another source of boosting when it's on the playing field. So we've talked a lot about that. Similar story with Kerack City Guard. It's boosting itself, not other cards, but same idea. Get them on there so they boost themselves as quickly as possible. Tridam Infantry is similar to Nathanial Pastodi in that this is a card that you want to be targeting with all of your boosts. Instead of bleeding like Nathanial Pastodi, it just deals outright damage. Then the Royal Guards here, largely just filling out our deck with some of the lower provision cost units, so we might not want to have these in our hand too often, but they do have an order ability, and so that will work, even with the copy of the card. So that's the idea there. Having 2 of those, not bad. And then lastly, I threw in the Redanian Knights, which is interesting because this unit actually starts out with 1 strength, so there's no downside to the copy of this unit that we're creating with 1 strength. It's just as powerful as the original, and it does also get boosted at the end of every turn, and so having 2 of them could be very useful. So that's a look at the deck. One other thing that I'll note is that I do think that we may run out of space in our rows, perhaps even fairly quickly, given how many copies of units we're going to create, because this is very much a unit-heavy deck right now. So that's one thing that I'm curious about is, are we going to run into that issue? But without further ado, let's get going. So let's try it out. Okay, so we'll face another Northern Realms person. I do think that Northern Realms will be one of the strongest factions in this game mode because there are so many units, as we saw, that can boost other units that benefit from having just 1 unit out there, but 2 even more so. So I think Voymir, as I said, can potentially be good, but maybe not quite as good as some of the other cards that are more straightforward with just being out there and giving us bonuses. Similar story with Hubert Rejk, so I think get rid of him. Maybe get rid of Voymir as well, although don't love all the Radovid Royal Guards. Let's try swapping out Voymir, and Corvo I think is a big pickup here. We have one more switch, and I think with this one, maybe we do try to get rid of one of the Royal Guards, and we get Tridam Infantry as one of our targets. I think we may not have had any of those before, so that sounds like a good pickup to me. And as I was saying before, I am very intrigued by getting two Strengers out there to start out around, because I think that if we play them both next to each other, we'll see the second one. Okay, so it is still 4 base strength, but it gets lowered down to 1. So that is a little bit unfortunate, because that means that we'll have to get her all the way up to 5 before she technically counts as boosted. But we can make that happen with our tactic card there, and then we do have our Royal Inspiration as well. So now we have 2 boosted Strengers. They will boost each other, and we can go pretty crazy here. Remember that we are technically going to be playing units on the end of each row, so I think that we might go Tridam Infantry next, play one here, and then the spawned version will go right here, and they will both get boosted from Strenger. Either that, or technically speaking, Corvo is usually the best one to play early when it comes to the boosters, because he's worth 2 boosts at minimum every round, assuming that you play a card and your opponent plays a card. Whereas Strenger is worth 2 at best per round, assuming that she's boosted. So technically speaking, let's go with Corvo first here. And it does mean that this Corvo is going to be quite vulnerable, and normally one of the issues with Corvo is because he's such low strength, he becomes a target, gets taken out early, but you can't boost your stealth with his order ability. However, when we have 2 Corvos, we can switch around, have one boost the other, and then the Strengers will bump them up a little bit higher still. But as you can see here already, we are getting pretty low in terms of row space, and as anticipated, as soon as Corvo comes out, our opponent wants to delete 1. That, yeah, certainly makes sense. One problem with this is that it does mean that if we are to play Tridam Infantry here, we play 1 in this location, it would get boosted once by this Strenger on the left. Second one would spawn all the way to the right, and that means that Corvo would still be getting the boost, not Tridam Infantry. So for that reason, positioning-wise, it gets a little bit tough. And I am tempted to play this now. We could even play it here, and that way it's getting double boosted by both of the Strengers. That's probably the way to go. Otherwise, we could go with the Botchling, or do something similar to what our opponents did with the Redanian Knights. Those are all certainly strong options here. We could even throw in Prince Anseis, so no shortage of options, and these are all things that you would not normally be able to afford to do. So I'm curious to see how this works out. We'll go with Tridam Infantry. And then, I think, why don't we deliberately boost Corvo a little bit here, and then boost this Tridam Infantry to try to keep it alive. Yeah, if we can get those Redanian Knights to lose their armor so they are no longer boosting themselves every turn, that'd be great. We did that with one of them. We'll see how our opponent reacts here. I think they did opt to go with a special card rather than a unit, which is interesting, because at some point in time, yes, I think we will run out of row space. But I think usually the strategy with Northern Realms is to, as quickly as possible, get your boosters out and get your cards that get boosted and do things when that happens out as early as possible. This is another card that I was thinking of adding to our deck. The Reinforced Trebuchets deal 1 damage to enemies in the range row. So to get multiple of them is certainly not a bad idea. And when we're talking about cards like Voymir or others that are using deploy abilities, that might be the type of card that we'd look to swap out with something like a Reinforced Trebuchet. So not a bad option by any means. Then, let's see, we could try to get an Anseis out here, play it on this spot, and get it boosted, at least on this side, from Strenger. On the other side, it would not get boosted at all. We could potentially go for a Temerian Drummer, and that way, yeah, tell you what, we actually do this, I think. We're going to start to run out of space very quickly here. But the reason for this is because this gives us a nice little pocket right here where we can double boost the Anseis on our next turn. Let's, speaking of boost up both of you guys a little bit here. Because if we play Anseis in between Temerian Drummer and Strenger here, that is similar to what we did with playing the Tridam Infantry between the 2 Strengers here. Tridam Infantry boosts the card to the right, and Strenger, when she is boosted, boosts both to the left and right. So that means Anseis, if we place him in between these 2 cards, will get double boosted. And that means we can get at least one Anseis very boosted up. Second Anseis will get played in the corner here. That's why I wanted to make sure that we got the Temerian Drummer out as soon as possible. That way, even our 1 strength Anseis is getting boosted. And this is another card that we were wondering, would it technically get the spawn unit to get created with 1 base strength, in which case even getting it boosted up to a 2 means that it would go over to dueling? Or would it be technically damaged from 4 down to 1, in which case, if we boosted a little bit, it would still just be using its order ability, not its inspired dueling ability? Which in some ways might actually be better for low strength Anseis, because you don't really want to be dueling with a 2 strength card. That doesn't do you much good. Okay, so this is interesting. They very much went with a more damage, or direct damage, type of build here. Going with 2 trebuchets and Redanian archers, which give you some targets, or at least more ability to target with your damage, because the reinforced trebuchets are random damage. So we went more with the boosting, they went more with the damage. Let's see, though, what we can do with Anseis here. I think now we are set up for this, but that might fill up our row here. I think it does. So Tridam Infantry is quite low. We could deliberately boost it here, in which case we could get it up to the point where it's no longer vulnerable. Or we could deliberately try to get our second Anseis boosted, because now we have multiple targets here. The infantries, yes, but also the Anseises. I do think that maybe we try boosting up this Anseis. And with that, we'll have a few that can duel some people, and then we'll just use our last boost on Tridam Infantry there. Could have used it on Temerian Drummer as well, but I think once we have our Anseises ready to go, because they need a turn before they can use their abilities, we'll be able to delete some of our opponent's offensive cards here, or the ones that deal damage to us at least, and then I think that will cut them off quite a bit. Once we do that, I think we will be in a good place. We'll be able to outpace them, and I'm thinking next card will either be Radovid, or we may just pass here, yeah, because we have a pretty sizable lead. I think what we found here was that we won this round because we were very aggressive on the units, played what ultimately was a very strong hand. We got our best boosters down early, like Strenger, like Corvo, got some targets down there, like Tridam Infantry. Okay, now we have some more interesting cards to play with here. Nathanial Pastodi is another card that we like to get boosted. We have Donimir as our defender, and then Radovid was another card I was hoping we might have been able to sneak in our last turn of the previous round, because it does have some carryover, but I think we can probably still do that this round. And then Botchling is another strong card here. I'm thinking we maybe swap out the Royal Guards. I am still intrigued by Redanian Royal Knight, especially when we can block it with Donimir of Troy. We saw our opponent did use that, but we were able to block it fairly effectively because we were able to deal enough damage that we got rid of the armor, and therefore they were no longer boosting, or at least one of them wasn't. So normally what I would do is I would lead off with Donimir of Troy. I think that is probably still what we do here, just to give us some safety, knowing that we have our defender down before we play other units that are more vulnerable, like, say, a Redanian Knight, or like, say, a Nenneke, especially when we're creating a copy of her with only 1 strength. Normally, I would play him in the range row in order to defend Corvo, because Corvo is, again, like I've said, the most vulnerable, yet arguably most powerful of all of our cards. We've already played Corvo, so we don't necessarily need to do it there. But I think we also have Redanian Knights that we might want to protect, so we'll do that. Let's boost the weaker of the 2 Donimirs, and yes, does just have 1 strength, or did, until we boosted it there, so it's a little silly, but that does mean that it's all the more difficult for our opponents to get through and actually deal damage to us, because we have 2 defenders, not just 1. And so they will need to target these guys before they're able to target anyone else. And, okay, it's bugging out a little bit here, but that's also the same card? What? How dare you? How dare you? Okay, so they opted to play in the melee row, which I would say, on some occasions, is good because, specifically against Northern Realms, you're expecting to have the trebuchets, as we saw in round 1 with our opponent, that can deal damage specifically to the range row, but I wanted to make sure that we were also protecting our Redanian Knights. Trying to think as to what the best order in which to play our remaining cards is, though. You want to play the Knight early. You want to play Nenneke. Well, she can actually be a late addition, because she can use all of our orders immediately if you need to. We don't have our Royal Inspiration at the moment, so I don't think it's urgent for us to play Nathanial Pastodi. I think it's either Redanian Knight or it's the Botchling. If we go with the Botchling, we could start getting rid of some of those shields, but even then we'd need to break through armor. It's tempting, but I think it might actually be Redanian Knight here. As we were saying before, I mean, technically it's trying to deal damage to this Redanian Knight, but it already starts out with 1 strength, so it doesn't matter. Now we have some boosting on the playing field. And okay, it's going to be very similar between us and our opponents. They opted not to play their Donimir in the range row, which, as I was saying, I deliberately played it to protect these cards here. So now I'm thinking suddenly Nathanial Pastodi does make sense because shields and armor, well, at least the bleed would get rid of the shield. It actually would go through the armor, so that part doesn't matter as much, but let's say we boost you. In many ways, yeah, if we could just get rid of this one here, then maybe it'd be nice. The boosting on the Redanian Knights is going to keep pace with the bleed, so Nathanial Pastodi actually is not a great counter to specifically those Redanian Knights there. We could actually play a Kerack City Guard and use that to move these units to the melee row, in which case they no longer get boosted. Yeah. And maybe we do that here. We'll take a turn before we're able to use that ability. But I think we go for that. And technically speaking, we don't have to play these cards in the range row, which I think means we do want to play Kerack City Guard in the melee row, because we're just going to run out of space pretty quickly. So let's do this. Second one will certainly be vulnerable, but they will boost themselves by 1 every turn before we use that ability. They're similar to the Redanian Knights in that sense, making our opponents have to choose between, well, doing something to try to get rid of someone, but we've done a lot to protect our Redanian Knights. Kerack City Guard, yes, I'd say is quite vulnerable. It's fine if you get rid of, well, I mean, we'd like to be able to keep both of them so we can remove both of your own Redanian Knights. That's an interesting one. I did not think of creating duplicate copies of Kerack frigates, but that could be a way of spawning a bunch of volunteers. But I think that's similar to what I was saying about the Kidwani Revenants, is that you're going to run out of space on a row very quickly, as we already have seen in round 1 and here at the beginning of round 2. So I think that especially if we bump these knights down, suddenly our opponent has little to no space in which to play those volunteers. We'll create the botchlings. Technically speaking, could have played those in either row. In fact, probably should have played that in the melee row, because now we may not have enough space for all of our Nennekes, and she does need to go in the range row. Might have room for one of them, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll see if our opponent has a way to remove a card in the range row. I think it's unlikely, but I do still think we have a setup that is better than what our opponent has. Could even use our Lacerate to outright remove the volunteers and the Kerack frigate. One of the downsides of playing the copy of the Kerack frigate is that if it spawns right next to the original one like this, then there's not a lot you can do to make sure that you are able to have the crew ability trigger. You played a Falibor, which is a really strong deploy ability, except you used it on Donimir, which is just wrong. You should have used it on Kerack City Guard so that you could repeat the Death Blow ability, but okay, sure, if you insist. Also, as we were saying, deploy abilities are, generally speaking, not going to be great when it comes to playing copies of cards, because it's only going to trigger once, as we saw right there. So we actually kind of want to save Nenneke for round 3 if we do have a round 3. So think here what we do is either we Lacerate in the melee row, or we play Radovid. I think we play Radovid largely because if our opponent passes here, it will give us some carryover. And so we want to make sure that we have that. That's one of the downsides to what we did in the previous round. And actually, we could deliberately swap over the Botchling to the Lubberkin. That would, I believe, get it back up to its 5 base strength. So it would give us +3 in that sense. It would also boost our weakest unit, which at one point in time may have been Nathanial Pastodi, which would have been fantastic. But now it's going to be Radovid here, which is fine. But I think that is technically a little bit better, especially when our Botchling right now is trying to deal damage to Donimir, because that's the highest unit on the opposing side, so we arguably should have swapped over this Botchling to a Lubberkin as well. Probably should. But we actually have card disadvantage at the moment. Or at least our opponent has 4 cards remaining, whereas we only have 2. We do have a lead right now, but I think we consider that our opponent has that 2-card advantage right now, that they could very well surpass us. So all the more reason why having the carryover from Radovid is important. That is way too late to play Anna Strenger. You get the benefit from her boosting every round, but if you play her in almost the last round, or almost your last turn, then you're getting very little benefit out of that. So that is Not a good play on their part. Great card, yes, just wrong circumstance in which to play it. So we could, at this point, perhaps even justify playing the Lacerate in the range row, because that would remove this Strenger at least. At the moment, it's not really doing anything, because it only boosts to the right when it's not inspired and there's no card to the right. Presumably, our opponent is going to play a card to the right next round. But, the thing that I'm seeing on the melee row that's making me hesitate a little bit with using Lacerate here is that we have a lot of armor, and so it's not going to deal damage to all that many units. It would get rid of this Kerack frigate, but I think we actually want to play it in the range row here. So let's do that. Then we will boost this Nathanial Pastodi. That is certainly the downside with what we did when we loaded up on things in the range rows. We prevented ourselves from playing Nenneke, and that was our primary source of boosting outside of the Lubberkins here. So that meant that Nathanial Pastodi didn't have a reliable way of getting boosted. Okay, see, this is a strong play, I'll give you that. Tridam Infantry plus Strenger is basically what we were doing in the previous go-round. The thing is, you want to play that as early as possible, because the longer it's out there, the better it becomes. When you play it near the end, it is doing very little for you. And I think on this occasion, what we might want to do is we actually might want to pass, because if we look here, you can sort of tell based on what I'm hovering over in the range row. Nenneke, we'd only create one of her, and we wouldn't have room for the copy. And so we are in the lead here. I think what we do is we force our opponent to play one more card, and at least make it so that we are on the same number of cards in the next round. We do have a little bit of boosting as well, and we're bleeding a little bit on the opposing side. So that means that it may even take 2 cards. Not if they have Amphibious Assault, though. So, okay, they can play whatever they want here, and it will get boosted if it's a low provision cost unit, which may be the case, although it's up to them to choose. So I think they probably will do it in 1 card here. Redanian Archer, okay, that's a low provision cost unit, so yes, it will get boosted significantly. But it's not enough yet. I think with Strenger that will probably do it, though, especially with that damage from those archers. So yeah. Oh, except, hold on. We have the boosting, even though we've passed from the Lubberkins. So that may actually be enough, because now we are at 61, which forces our opponent to play another card here. Or at least use their orders here, which means they are forced into playing another card. So yes, that means we'll have card advantage going into the final round. So we forced our opponent's hand here. So success in that sense, that is usually one of the strengths of Northern Realms, that just without any Temerian Drummers or Strengers on our own side, that's usually what ends up making it happen. Oh my goodness. Playing Corvo last, what are you thinking? That is your best card. Why did you play it last? The earlier you play it, the better it becomes. I'm ashamed of playing Northern Realms and ever playing Corvo last. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. It's vulnerable, yes, but as long as you have some way of protecting it, especially when you have numerous copies of it, you can create a copy when you play it, then, I mean, just do it. Get it out there. Maybe one of them goes down, as we saw in the first round, but it's too good to leave it there and only get 1 boost out of it. That's insane. Okay, so we do get Nenneke, and we can play her in the range row this time. Getting 2 Egmunds is also appealing. I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time to benefit from the boosting from Redanian Knight, and yes, getting a target for the boost from Nenneke and from Egmund, that's fantastic. Royal Guards, let's try swapping this around, and Voymir, as I was saying before, I think, yeah, kinda, could sort of work. Okay, so they're leading off with the Tridams. I think what we do here is we lead off with Egmund. Egmund will boost the copy that we create of him. And we also, oh, there you have it. There's our 2 Vids carrying over. That is the carryover we were saying we wanted, and we were fortunate because they can spawn on a random row here. We could even outright delete one of these Tridam Infantries. I don't really want to do that right now. It is nice to get rid of our opponent's engines, but at the same time, if we play our Tridam Infantry in here, get it boosted in the next turn, that would be nice. That's kind of what I was thinking. I suppose, technically speaking, that means we only need 1. Then again, I'm skeptical that our opponent will be able to benefit from having 2 Tridam Infantries out there. I think we're only capable of removing 1, and they're only really going to benefit from having 1, so it's not going to make a huge difference. Okay, and getting rid of Radovid is like, well, I mean, I suppose it's random damage when you boost Tridam Infantry. So you didn't necessarily choose to get rid of Radovid, even if that was quite silly. So now we do this. This Tridam will get boosted, similar to what our opponent has done. But this is why I was saying don't get rid of Radovid. He's just going to come back. So now you're getting boosted by Egmund. You are still getting boosted by Egmund. We couldn't have made it so that you were guaranteed to get boosted by Egmund as well, at least once Radovid did play in the melee row. So I suppose in some ways, it's a little bit of a downside to that. If Radovid had showed up in the range row, then I believe we would have had Tridam Infantry show up right next to it. Okay. Heat Wave, sure. Fine. Not really a concern because now we can... Well, I suppose it would have been nice to use Voymir on Tridam Infantry. That was sort of what I was thinking we would use him on. But why don't we go Nenneke for now? We get the 2 copies of her, both of which have the 4 charges, so we can just absolutely load up on boosting Tridam here. One with our leader ability, then all the Nennekes. And ideally, yeah, if we could get rid of either of these 2 cards here, so that Tridam Infantry is no longer getting boosted, that would be ideal, but doesn't look like it's going to happen here. Unless we're not so concerned about boosting Radovid here. Our other Egmund was the one that was more important to us, so we could... In fact, we probably should have changed the order of operations here a little bit to guarantee that we got rid of the source of the boosting. I mean, we've won, but just for the sake of deliberately making a point of playing in the most optimal way. And then, pick your pick. Sure, we'll boost Radovid, because why not? And there you have it. There's our victory, and so, yes, it does seem like the units are very strong, as anticipated, especially the units that do things when they are out on the playing field, for sure. The deploy abilities, you want to be a little bit wary of those, because you'll only be able to use them once. And you also want to be wary of loading up on rows, especially when you have units that you need to play in a certain row, as we saw with Nenneke for a little bit there. We loaded up on the range row and weren't able to play her where we wanted to, or at least we would have only played one of her, would not have been able to get a copy of it, which would be unfortunate. Okay, so we're going to play against monsters here. And monsters, depends what they're going for. I would think that the strongest thing with monsters might be when they can use Thrive, which is similar to what we were doing with Northern Realms, and that means that they can boost their cards when they play cards that are stronger. And it benefits from having a lot of units out there. So that's what I'm expecting to see. I think we don't want Voymir. That is not one of our better cards, as we were saying. Similar story with Hubert here. Temerian Drummer is definitely a nice pickup. I think Royal Guard might be the other one we want to dump here. Alright, a few Kerack City Guards. I'd say our hand here is not terribly strong. At the moment, our only target for the boost would be Anseis, and it's not a bad thing. But I do like to make sure that we have at least a Tridam Infantry or Nathanial Pastodi as well. So let's see, in terms of what we want to lead off with, we did this last time round with doubling up on Strenger, and I think that is still a strong option here. And we can do what we did last time, because we're going first. We can use our Tactic card to boost the weaker of the 2 Strengers, and make sure that they are both inspired, boosting each other, getting us off to a very strong start here, and getting them high enough that it's unlikely that our opponent would be able to destroy one. And yes, this is exactly what I was expecting, some Thrives. Because being able to create a bunch of those... Now, this one does have a deploy ability that spawns another one. However, remember, the deploy ability is only triggering once. It's not triggering a second time for the unit that gets spawned. So it only plays 3, not 4, of the Endriga larva. So that is still a lot of Thrive units, which is a little bit concerning. We could say we had a Tridam Infantry to play one in between here and another one there. That would give us a lot of damage. That would be fantastic. I wish we had a little bit more damage with the Lacerate, because then we could wipe out an entire row, but not quite here. Not enough damage to do that. So I think maybe we go with a Botchling. This one, technically speaking, doesn't matter which row we played on. I do wonder, though, something like a Temerian Drummer, also good early. Getting the Anseis boosted, also nice. I think I'm interested in the damage, though. Gonna play in the melee row. That does mean that, at least for the moment, we're not benefiting as much as we could from the Strenger boosts. But I'm just being wary of running out of space in the range row, like we saw the previous go-round. Because I think there are other cards that we'd rather be boosting than the Botchlings. That is a very strong card to be having 2 of. That is a card that gets boosted at the end of your turn, can deal 3 damage, and in fact you did that right off the bat. which I would argue may not have been worth it. I suppose we were dealing 1 damage every turn with the Botchling, so maybe it was worthwhile, but that does limit the strength you have from this Apiarian Phantom quite a bit. So now what do we do? You can only use that damage when you are in the melee row, so we could potentially play Kerack City Guard in effort to move you to the range row. You would still get boosted every turn for not having used that ability, but you wouldn't ever be able to actually cash that one in and deal the 3 damage. The other thing is, Geralt Yrden, this is largely the reason why I wanted to keep it, is because we can just reset this melee row, and then suddenly that can get rid of much of the threat from these Endriga Larvae and also the Apiarian Phantom, so maybe we don't worry too much about it. Let's get more boosting out there with the Tridam Infantries. We'll boost Botchling here just to keep it a little bit safer, because we saw that our first one went down. Was, of course, the weaker of the Botchlings. If we really wanted to, we could also swap over the Botchling over into the Lubberkin to boost our own units rather than dealing the damage. And I think, especially in this game mode, you could certainly make the case for that, because your 1-strength copies are going to be pretty vulnerable. Death Wish units. Making copies of those with just 1 strength. That's an interesting one. Wasn't initially what came to mind, but it does mean that you have more things to destroy, more things to probably consume. So that's probably not a bad option. I'm thinking here we start going with things that get boosted by themselves every turn, probably in the range row. Let's go with Redanian Knight, because that definitely does need to be in the range row. That way we're benefiting from all the boosting we have going on here. And, I mean, again, we could swap over the Botchling. Technically speaking, we would lose 1 strength in the process. Could we go back down to the 5 strength? But at this point, the highest unit on the opposing side is the Apiarian Phantom. So that would be the target. It would actually deal damage. It wouldn't just hit armor, which is one of the reasons why I felt like previously it maybe wasn't great. Now, at least now that we've gotten through that armor a little bit better. Let's see. So yeah, here comes the consume. That means the Death Wishes will trigger here and deal a lot of damage. You didn't play it in the middle of those 2 Death Wish units, which was a little strange. Okay, that was, I would think, a misplay. Maybe you didn't realize that the copy was not also going to trigger the deploy ability. So you got rid of one of our Redanian Knights, and of all the ones you could have gotten rid of, that was the preferred one, because it was not getting boosted by anything. It was on the left side of the Temerian Drummer. So that's fine. I'm thinking here we get more of the units out that boost themselves, or we start getting out Anseis. The thing is, we might want to try to save Anseis here. How are we looking in terms of our strength relative to our opponent? I think we can win this round even without Anseis, so let's save him. And let's go... We do want to try to make sure that we get Radovid out there. It's just that he does not benefit from getting played early, unlike other cards. So I want to play Kerack City Guard, because that does benefit from being played early, because it gets boosted every turn. And then I'm thinking next turn will be Radovid, and then we'll probably pass, unless our opponent does something crazy. Okay. We paid for it when we got a little bit greedy there, wanted to go a little bit longer. And so, I mean, we could still play Radovid, but I think we definitely just pass and take the victory here. In fact, we played 1 more card than our opponent, so that is unfortunate. So one thing we could do here is we could deliberately pass immediately in round 2. Make it so that our opponent needs to play a card in order to take that round, and then we are even in terms of cards going into round 3. That is probably the way to go, in which case that gives us more time to optimize our hand here. Does mean that the carryover from Radovid, if we're only playing him in round 3, not really a factor, so he might not be all that great for us. This is, I think, we did not see Vissegerd last time around, but I do think that that could be a very strong card for us. Still not a huge fan of the Royal Guards. Let's try getting rid of you. Donimir, I mean, sure, for the shield. That's fine. Then, at the moment, our only target is Anseis. If we could say... Maybe we do swap out? Oh, okay. Swapped out Radovid, got Hubert. I don't necessarily think that was a great trade. I think either card less than ideal. Okay, so what we're going to do here, though, is we are going to pass, or at least, technically speaking, we could play 1 card as a bit of a throwaway, because we will draw 3 in the next round and get back up to 10. So right now we have 1 card to burn. I'm thinking it probably would be Hubert. Basically just play your worst card. And it's good enough that it might force our opponent into thinking, oh my goodness, I need to actually play this round and use a good card, and they might overinvest. That is the hope. But worst comes to worst, they just play one card and they immediately outpace us. And that, if you play your arguably best card in Haunt, that is more than all right for me. That is, I would argue, a humongous misplay. Because now we can pass. We are still winning. I mean, you were going to be able to play another card anyway, but the big thing is that you lost one of your best cards in a round that I was going to give you anyway. So you very much did not need to do that. Okay, so yes, that does mean that we're carrying over into round 3 with the same number of cards for each person. We had a little bit of time to optimize our hand here. Still think that these two are probably not cards we particularly want to see. Pastodi is the type of target I was talking about us wanting to have, so I like that. Then Royal Guards, Tridam Infantry is another one of those targets. Okay, so now we have a lot of targets. We have a booster in Nenneke. We have a booster in Temerian Drummer. Ooh, okay. Every unit is destroyed during your turn. Boost self by 2. So I think we'll definitely see a lot of consumption here. There are a few potential counters to this. We could play Tridam Infantry, boost it with our leader ability, and it would randomly damage one of these units by 1. We hope that it's this one, and then it gets destroyed, and that way we are cutting off a bit of an engine here. We could alternatively play Kerack City Guard, and then it would take a turn before we're able to use our order, but once we do, we could bump you over to the range row, and then neither of them would be able to do anything. I'm thinking we actually might want to go that route. Let's try that. It will be a little bit slower, because we won't be able to do anything immediately. Oh, I also just passed when I forgot to use our leader ability. Oops. Obviously, don't do that. But this way, as long as they don't take out one or both of the Kerack City Guards, we can then move both of these cards to the other row. And then it may mean that they get 1 turn worth of boosting out of it, or it may mean that if they do this and don't do anything about it, then we can more or less just shut this off. This is a really strong card, though. Whenever you play a unit with Death Wish, just trigger it. So, it does need to be enraged. Oh. Okay. I think we actually might want to prioritize moving the Weavesses rather than moving the She-Trolls. Especially because, do we still have Geralt Yrden? Or was that in the previous round? Previous game? It may have been. I might be mixing things. No, we do. I'm not mixing things up. Okay, we do still have it. So I think that means that we can reset the melee row here and not have to worry too much about these getting crazy boosted. We do still need to play a card, though. That is kind of important. Let's go for... Let's get Donimir out in the range row to protect Nenneke. And then we'll want to also get our cards that we want to do the boosting with out. Like, maybe even lead off with Anseis. That could be a way to get rid of one of these if our opponent takes a while to start destroying their cards. But big thing was, wanted to make sure that we were making sure that the Weavess incantation does not do anything, because it only uses its ability when it's in the range row. So now we're forcing our opponent into using their leader ability in order to actually consume these cards. Now suddenly the range row is not a bad option for using the Geralt Yrden either, resetting these Ekimaras from 5s down to 2s. It's not bad, but we'll see how it all lines up. This is likely to be our last card that we play. So here, we either play some of our boosters or cards that we want to get boosted. We don't have our leader ability right now, so it's not like we have any boosts that are ready to go immediately. So I think for that reason, we probably do go with Temerian Drummer here. Let's deliberately boost up our defender that is a little bit weaker here rather than our one that's a little bit stronger. And then next turn, we'll either play Anseis, because we want him to get boosted, or we'll throw in Pastodi, or we'll throw in Tridam Infantry. Depends what type of boosting we want to do. Those beasts are concerning. And certainly it's starting to look like the range row might be the place where we want to do our Yrden, because these guys will start to get very high up there in terms of their strength, unless they're the highest unit out there. And tell you what, right now the highest unit is either Donimir 7, or it's actually She-Troll Vergen is 8. So you won't get that much more boosted unless and until you destroy more units on your own turn. So, if we could destroy one of you guys without using a Yrden. I mean, Yrden isn't destroyed, but then that means we could be a little more decisive with which row we want to do the Yrdening on. I think we go for Pastodi here. Both of them will get boosted, which means both of them will be inflicting bleeds. The bleed is technically more damage than the outright damage from Tridam Infantry because it deals 2 bleed every turn, whereas Tridam Infantry only deals 1 damage. Thing is, it takes longer for the bleed to apply, of course, because it only goes 1 per turn, and you might find that you overbleed a card. Like, we could just load up on a bunch of bleeds on you, and say have 20 bleeds on this one card, and obviously we'd never have time for those 20 bleeds to trigger, and also if we had dealt 20 damage with Tridam Infantry, it would have stopped once this card was dead, and instead shifted over to a different one. So it can overbleed on a card, which is one of the downsides. But still, I think with time for the bleeds to trigger, Pastodi is the way to go there, or potentially Anseis. We could play Anseis in the melee row, and this is the key card I was expecting from an overwhelming Hunger Monsters deck. Normally, you would want to use your leader ability to get these guys to come back like crazy. We have used 2 charges of that already. That's another card that we might want to end up resetting with a Yrden, so let's see. We could also, don't forget we have Lacerate. At this point, I think we might want to get Nenneke out there. We're also starting to run out of space in our range row, so I think it's important that we get her out there. We might leave it at this for now. We're going to save our boosts, and then maybe we throw out Anseis on our next turn in the melee row. That'll give him, with his formation, Zeal, so he'll be able to use his order ability immediately. Oh, okay, you're sacrificing Weaves. And then consuming, oh, both of these guys. Well played, well played. It does mean your melee row is getting very big and is looking very enticing from a Yrden standpoint. So even if you do have a very high number right now, I'm not terribly concerned yet because a lot of this is going to go way down when we do use that Yrden. So let's see. In that case, that does still mean, though, that your beasts are going to get boosted further, because Geralt Yrden is still the highest card out here. Let's see. So I think, yeah, we do go with Prince Anseis here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to deal some damage and or boost an Anseis like crazy. Let's get you up to 6. Get rid of this beast. Then can we get you boosted high enough that you can do anything interesting? That's my next question. 7. Not enough to get rid of this beast. We can do this. Make you an 8. Still not really enough. I think we're starting to run out of boosts. Well, using the bleed on that beast is helpful, but it is going to go up by 2 every turn still. So Anseis is probably not going to be able to catch it. Oh, there's another card that you want to be destroying with your leader ability, and that might be what's about to happen here. Okay. So I'm trying to cut off some of the engines, so to speak, the cards that continue to create value with the Anseis. We did that with one of the beasts, but the other beast was a little bit out of range, and still is. If we were to, say, use a Lacerate, that would get you down to 9. We still don't have it yet. If we had our leader ability, then we'd have just enough. Vissegerd is starting to become relevant here, I think, because we have a reasonable amount of boosted units. Not a ton, but enough that this could start to become a factor, especially with 2 Vissegerd. So I think we can't play him last because it does take a turn until we are able to use that order. He does not have Zeal. Unless we were to, say, just bide our time a little bit more. No, I think we want to do this early because we are going to find that the beasts are going to continue to get boosted. What I want to do is basically deal some damage with the Visegerds to this beast up here, lower it to the point where it is within range for Anseis. Oh, except you might be about to do something crazy with the Kerack. Now you're going to consume all these guys. The ones that you can consume like crazy. If you play him in the melee row, again, very much looking like a melee row Yrden right now. That looks fine to me. That's where all of your strength is right now. Almost all of it. The only exception being the beast right here, which is why I'm very much trying to target this one. Okay, oh, this Vysegerd only gets... Oh, it is the deploy ability to gain the charges. Okay, so that means this one's the only one that gets the bazillion charges. Okay. That may not matter here, because all we need to do is get you down to either 8 strength or 9 strength if we boost Anseis further. Let's do that here. We can leave it at that, and then go with... Oh, hold on. This first. Need to get him up to 9. Then do this. Now, range row not looking so great. Could even try, say, lacerating it. But I think we just throw out Tridam Infantry here, which is, at this point, largely a throwaway card because we don't have any consistent ways to boost it. We are largely using our boosts in the other rows. With our 3 damage on this Vissegerd, I'm not sure we have any amazing options here. We could probably just hold on to it for now. I mean, there's the risk that our opponent destroys Vissegerd before we can use it. Okay, Werecat can deal some damage. Used it on the range row, and he got rid of someone there. I did not remember who was there, to tell you the truth. Okay, now you're destroying it like crazy, though, with its Death Wish, which also re-triggers that ability. That did hurt. It definitely did hurt. But I'm thinking, now we go for the Lacerate in the range row. We don't do the melee row, because we are going to reset the melee row. There's no real benefit to doing that. And then, now, we definitely don't want to take you out. Do this. And if we could... Actually, we want to get rid of you. Because we don't want you to get reset from a 1 up to a 4. That would actually be counterproductive. It does give you a little more room in the melee row, which might not be what we want to allow you to have, but let's get rid of... Not you. But say just you. And that'll be the end of our turn here. Yrden will be the last card that we play. And, if you have some quick math skills, you might be able to figure out if we are about to win or not. I, myself, would not dare to try to crunch all these numbers here to see how much these are going to get lowered when we do play this, but let's give it a shot here.
Let's get this over with.
Reset, and there you have it. We have taken the lead, and, I mean, we can just throw on boost on Tridam Infantry. That'll boost us by 1, deal 1 damage, and there you have it. Victory. Big Yrden, and that is why I was saying that even if the deploy ability only gets triggered once, still, I think, worthwhile to keep a Geralt Yrden in your deck for that very reason right there. So there's a look at the new +1 seasonal event where we spawn a copy of every unit that we play, allowed us to pull off some crazy combinations. Let me know what you think might be the best factions, cards, and strategies for this new game mode. And we didn't see much in the way of the new cards from the Way of the Witcher expansion. If you are interested in checking some of that stuff out, I will be streaming Gwent later today at about 7:30 p.m. US Eastern Time at twitch.tv/lidsvids. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment, and subscribe for more Gwents in the future.